Greetings, listeners. This is Abir Asikder again with the Local Global Leaders Podcast. For this episode titled A Work in Progress, I spoke with Rob Perez, the founder and co-owner of DV8 Kitchen here in Lexington. DV8 Kitchen is a great restaurant that offers second chance employment to people in substance use recovery. We spoke about his different motivations toward being a leader, from his wife and his family to his faith to his passion for helping marginalized communities. Rob also emphasized how he leads a business that not only has an emphasis on social impact, but adjusts to and reforms the way the restaurant industry is doing things. We had a great conversation. I learned a lot about how he helps people here in Kentucky while also being recognized across the nation and even the world for his great work. And I appreciate how vulnerable and personal he was about his leadership journey. Hope you enjoy the episode. I'm excited to be here today in the studio with Rob Perez, the founder of DV8 Kitchen. Rob, thank you so much for joining me and being one of my first guests on the Local Global Leaders Podcast.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
So starting out, I want to know who you are. Who is Rob Perez and how you became a leader? So would you like to introduce yourself off the bat to the listeners, however you wish, and what do you want listeners to know about you?
Yeah, so I am a person of faith. I am a husband. I'm a dad. And I'm a business owner, and we try to help people through our business, and that's really kind of the focus of what I do for a living.
That's awesome. Can you tell us about your business in DV8 Kitchen?
Yeah, so my wife wanted to express her faith in a more meaningful way, not just on a Sunday. And she suggested that we take our lived experience and try to help people. And our lived experience is that in my background, I have a background of addiction. She helped me through rehab at 25. Mm-hmm. And we've been together in the restaurant industry for, a long time. And she thought that it would be good to try to offer up second chance jobs for people that were in a second chance position, really looking for a job right after getting into recovery and with the passive incarceration, most likely. And so I thought that was a cute idea, but one that would never, ever work. And I said no for like 3 years. Uh-huh. And she convinced me to go ahead and try. And it's been quite a journey, but at the end of the day, it was one of the best things that she convinced me to do. And it's pretty rewarding.
Yeah, that's great. But yeah, I'm really happy to hear that. So would you say your wife was, of course, a major influence for you for being a leader and a change maker here in the community?
Yeah, it wasn't me being a change maker or a leader. She led the way 100%.
That's really amazing to hear. It's really great to have like the partners in your life who really, influence the leadership journey you take.
Yeah, I'm blessed for sure.
And so, I guess you kind of answered this question. Yeah, what motivates you to be a leader in your community? You mentioned your wife, if you want to talk more about that. Or I appreciate you mentioning your faith, if you feel, comfortable how that inspires you to be a leader.
No, I think that what I tell our people at DV8 when I'm talking to them candidly about life, I think that it's literally a good day when you can follow your values that you set out for. And we don't all live up to every value every day. But if we could do a better job today than we did yesterday of living up to the values that we hold high, then I think it's a pretty doggone good day. And you kind of have to start off with the values, and I think that who I am is, hopefully faith first, family next, friends next, and business, after that. But that's kind of who I am, and I hope that every day I could get better, but I haven't been good at it a long time. I feel like I was a pretty poor leader really until, maybe the last 5 or 6 years.
I appreciate you not just sharing that, but embracing that vulnerability, saying, it was a struggle to be a leader, particularly at the beginning. And I appreciate you, of course, sharing your background in substance use recovery. With the faith you found, was that something like, I guess, after you dealt with that recovery that you found that faith, or was it something there before?
No, I had faith early. I wasn't born to a household that practiced any kind of faith. But I found faith when I was 11, and sometime in the high school transition, I don't think it was much important to me. At least I didn't think about it. I didn't do it. But I always believed that there was, a higher power for sure.
That's cool. I know I saw in your bio, in your earlier career, you started out kind of managing franchise restaurants and a bit more in corporate America. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So I pretty early at 23, I was working in a restaurant in California, and the president of the company got asked to go to a fledgling restaurant that only had 6 restaurants at the time, and it was called Hard Rock Cafe. And so it was brand new. And I got offered to go and work for that, and that was just an unbelievable opportunity because we were growing so fast. It was so popular that I got to do jobs that I never was qualified for, but we were growing so fast, it was just like next man up. And so I did operations first and then went to onto development. And for 10 years, it was really great. And then the CEO at the time, who had come originally from the Walt Disney Company, was going to go back, and he offered me an opportunity to go to Disney with him. And so I went, and we opened up. It was great. We got to conceive, design, and open and operate entertainment complexes throughout the U.S.
Oh, wow.
And the one I particularly worked on was a thing called ESPN Zone. And it was a blast. I went from really working every day in the restaurant industry and getting to associate with a bunch of people in the music industry, and that was really fun. And then I got to do the same thing in sports, and I love both. So those are 2 of my passions. Not great at either, but I love them. And at the end of the day, I think that that was really fun, and it really kind of focused me on trying to be better and better at what I did and the craft that I had. So it was really great. So that was a great 17 years of my career, and then Diane and I started opening up restaurants on our own after that.
That's awesome. I can imagine that sort of cross-sector exposure to, you said, the art and music industry, to, of course, the restaurant industry, to, typical corporate America, to, you said, ESPN, to the sports and entertainment. I guess that, that must have driven you a lot to, learn from different types of areas to do what you want to do now, right?
I think it provided a little bit more leverage to drive me to want to be better at my core job. I might have been working on staffing a restaurant. I might have been working on food. I might have been working on, whatever you do in a restaurant or any other business. But there was the underlying fun of what we got to do in both of those segments, where you got to be front row at in a concert that you're catering backstage, and end up talking to Sting or Elton John, right?
Oh man!
And then with the sports, being able to sit and watch Chris Berman or another ESPN sportscaster deliver a segment on the NFL, and it was just really fun. And those were the extra benefits that I think that drove me to try to be better at what I did every day. And it had nothing to do with what I was doing and my core responsibilities, but that leverage was something that I think was important to me. I liked it, and so I wanted to do good at my job so I can continue it. I don't think that it's any harder than that. Oh,
wow, that's awesome. It's cool getting to meet all those people. Yeah, I'm just so jealous.
Yeah. Well, I really, really feel blessed to be able to have all the career experiences that I've had, and it was a blast.
Yeah. As you mentioned this, that exposure helped you transition to what you do now. So how did you transition to that earlier career and, managing franchises, restaurants, or just, managing established things, to starting your own restaurant and franchise?
Yeah, well, I think that, I always wanted to be a restaurant owner, and my wife really didn't. She was risk averse and thought that was for rich people to be able to do. And I had a friend who did it and sent us a little prospectus, and she goes, "Oh, wow. they're pretty talented, but I didn't know that they could do that. Could we do that? And I'm like, yes, of course we could do that. And so it turned into us trying to figure out how to build a group of restaurants so that it could be a good living for us, and we also could have a lifestyle that supported being, active parents. So it really provided us with two things that were super important. So the means to the end, kind of.
That's really cool. What have been, what have been the biggest struggles you've encountered in your leadership journey and starting your own thing, from starting the restaurants here or from past experience? What have been the biggest struggles?
Yeah, my biggest struggle, and it's still the biggest struggle now, is trying to figure out how to work with people to get them motivated to do what needs to be done in the business. And, all of business leadership has changed so much, especially in the last 5 years. And the restaurant industry in particular had the furthest one of the furthest to go in terms of what culture was. The whole yes chef, mentality and screaming and yelling, it's real.
Yeah.
And if that's what you grew up in, it doesn't make it right, 100%, but that's where I came from. And it was very hierarchical. It was very control and command. And it's a struggle even for me today to try to convert from that old model. And it's funny because it was always a struggle, no matter what the system was, to try to figure out how to get folks motivated to do what you needed them to do. And it's still that way. But it's just, it has to be a different approach. And then it's hypersensitive with the workforce that we have at DV8. So it's interesting to contemplate how far we've had to come because just the relationship that's expected between an employer and an employee is completely different than it used to be, but also because the population that I'm employing is completely different.
Yeah. And I appreciate you saying that this, I watched some cooking and kitchen shows and I always said, that intense anger, that's just a bit scripted, of course. But I guess like you said, that is a part of the culture.
That is not scripted. I mean, some of the antics that they have is a little bit much.
Yeah.
But I mean, in the middle of a shift and you're trying to get something done, it used to be intense and it was screaming and yelling, and it wasn't specifically berating, but it was, why can't you figure this out?
Yeah.
What are you doing? Do you've been trained. What is the problem with you? It's not like, I see some of the shows where they're throwing things at people.
Yeah.
I'd never seen that. Not in,
Oh, wow.
In 35 years prior to things changing. In 35 or 40 years, I'd never seen that. But in terms of holding someone accountable in front of groups of people and raising your voice, that was just what you did. And I'm not proud of it. And I'm not saying it was right ever.
Yeah.
But it was done.
Yeah.
And it was done at every level, at every place I've ever worked.
Yeah.
Prior to the last 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I appreciate you sharing that too, because I used to be a teacher, and in the classroom, I'll admit a few times I defaulted to that to get these unruly kids to behave properly, just yelling. I don't think I said anything like berating, but just yelling like that and trying to be authoritative. But I think data shows being an effective teacher is more about just being calm, managing respectfully. But I can see that. And but yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. Do you think the social impact and sort of social enterprise model then of DV8 Kitchen, it does help, can that be a lesson for other restaurants to, get away from that hierarchical authoritative model?
I don't know that a restaurant has to change from a hierarchical, but the way that it is managed. But I think that it's incumbent to understand what the workforce is looking for. Whether it's as progressive as things like transparent compensation, or if it's just how you treat people. And it's for old people like me, you wonder how to approach it, because it's so different. And all I could say is that there's certain businesses where there has to be a control cop. When you're sitting at Expo and you have servers that need something and a kitchen that's having a difficult time because everybody has bad days, you're going to have to be able to be clear, and you're going to have to be able to give direction. And sometimes you're going to have to say, hold on, I can't deal with this.
Yeah.
Give me a second, and I'm going to deal with you in 1 second. You okay? And then talk to the kitchen. Kitchen, okay, I need you to stop what you're doing. You see what I mean? There is some control and command in certain systems. It's like I know it's not life and death, but people need that immediate information and that immediate specific direction so that the whole group can work well together. And it's interesting because I think sometimes the collision between old school and the new progressive thought process of what an employment is collide.
Yeah.
And the gray area on both sides creates dialogue and sometimes confusion between either generations or people that aren't used to restaurants or that kind of environment.
Yeah.
And so everybody's learning, and it is a really interesting process right now because it used to be that the bosses always had the leverage, but frequently now it feels like the employees have more leverage based on the employment pool and the way that the economy is going. And so it's really interesting, and I think that it's a fascinating study in just human interaction, and it's has a lot to do with leadership and what is the leader going to do, because I do believe that it's the leader, the boss, that's their responsibility to respond to it.
Yeah. Let's put this back just a little. You're good. I'm just going to scoot it back a little bit. Yeah. There we go. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And with that, you kind of talked about, I guess you talked about these examples. Did you have other examples of toxic leadership you've experienced? Or more so, I guess, what did you learn from those examples?
Well, I think I learn all the time. And it's not easy, I struggle with it on some level even today. Some people call it raising your voice, and some people just say it's passionate, and it depends on how you take it.
Yeah.
Right? And so I'm adjusting all the time, and what I'm trying to do is establish an environment where I deliver it the way that people want to hear it. And so it's, I think we've been able to accomplish some amazing things. And I think that people are, they all have their own ideas about bosses. They all have their own ideas about what they learned, what they didn't learn, what was good, what was bad. I think it's a very interesting moment in time where people have the power that they do, which I embrace. It's not a criticism at all. But I think that culturally, it's just a really interesting time to study this.
It's interesting. And with that, you talked a little bit about your leadership style. I'd like to, know more about that style and philosophy. And in particular, do you kind of have you had, of course, different leadership styles when you're, when you, of course, were founding the restaurant versus the day-to-day management versus how you like your style in the past? Yeah.
And I'm not proud of a lot of my style, because my style initially was, you get the job done, you make the profit that it is, or you're out of here. And it's every day, every plate of food, all the time. And it was, I'm sure some people thought it was toxic. We thought that was the right way to be. We didn't recognize the issue. And it is really, I mean, I grew up playing sports, and it was really just a locker room mentality. And it was, it was all designed around sports, and that's how I identified it. So it went from sports to employment, and it just seemed to be right. And I remember having conversations with managers just going, wow, why is that person so sensitive? Why are they taking this personal? It's just business. It's just running a restaurant. This is just the way that it is. And I wish I could take a lot of that back.
Yeah.
I have lots of regrets about that. Then, as we transitioned to DV8, I knew that something had to be different, largely because people are dealing with their forms of trauma. You have to be more trauma informed for sure with our clientele, so it made it even more important. And I felt as though my leadership and all the people that I managed had to change to that. And it was good because you realize that this is like really important. And it was way before, because I kind of see the Me Too movement with, that kind of started this whole thing. While it was about women and power, it was something that got applied to the workplace with Harvey Weinstein, and then it did creep into things like restaurants with some of the chefs. And if you can remember specifically, a big wave of what happened when there was a lot of canceling was about chefs.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you kind of put that all together, but I think that that's the cultural reason behind it, all the things that we just talked about it. Because the control and command style and the intenseness of it, and in no way do I want to say that it's right. I will tell you that it's not life and death, but just to give some perspective, I feel like in the restaurant you're trying to perform at such a high level, so much stress, so many things going on. We used to talk about it like it was air traffic control.
Yeah.
It is that intense, that, you're trying to satisfy so many people all at once. And I don't know if that helps people in their mind's eye to try to figure out why the restaurant industry was particularly that tough. I do think it's very interesting that this is an entertainment form for so many people, but they decry, at the same time that it's happening, and I think that that's very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very reflective on society, what we choose for entertainment versus what we actually want there to be.
Yeah. We eat it up. I mean, right now the Bear's the biggest thing on streaming. So I don't know. I don't know what that says about us. And again, that's no excuse for poor treatment in the past. None.
I appreciate you talking about, you said trauma-informed care in your leadership. Like, would you say, your leadership style is like trying to be largely based on trauma-informed care and toward a trauma-informed leadership?
Well, I think that the interesting thing, we've tried to develop a model, and we try to teach our managers about the idea that we want to be relational employers. So it's unique, I think, because we have been told that it's about performance, and most HR kind of idioms revolve around that. So the idea is that you can't manage the person. You have to manage the performance because that's what's fair. Well, I choose to say, and this is a play on words, not messing with this industry. I find that process when dealing with our folks, and frankly, in my past, if I would have been more human and more relational, it wouldn't have been only about performance. It would have been treating the person. And lack of information is not what we need. We need more information, in my opinion. And there needs to be some protection, in my opinion, where we can have the ability to get into things that matter.
Yeah.
Because think about it. In a job, you're frequently there, and you're frequently doing things in a group setting for more hours than you're with your family, right?
Yeah.
And so for us to not know about some of the things that are going on in someone's life seems not fair. And we have all these rules, regulations about making sure that we don't talk about personal things.
Okay.
And I think it's just fascinating because we've turned it into not human and not relational, in my opinion. And we're trying to get back to that. And we talk to our folks, frankly, about things that they're going through. How is their housing? Do they have a space where they can be alone? How is their program? Do they have someone that supports them, like a sponsor? Do you have someone that you also receive therapy from, at like a behavior modification program? You're coming from addiction. There's usually something that you've gone through in the past that you might need to deal with. We don't need to know what, but are you doing it, right? And then probably even more interesting is we're saying that we want to know about your testing today and tomorrow. We are a second chance employer, and we're giving second chance employment to people, but we are saying in order to keep this job, we're going to ask you to test, randomly, weekly, and we're going to continue to give you a job, but that's the gateway to taking a job. Most people with our employment group just say no. And what we're doing is saying yes to anybody that's participating in an active recovery program. And so that, I think, is what some people would say intrusive, and I would say it's relational. And I'm saying that this relational model is designed to be real human and to be incredibly caring about your people in order to make sure that you could do whatever you can do to save someone's life. And that's where our folks are. They need someone to just care about who they are, what they are, and explain some very simple things to help reparent them, to encourage them to continue, and to make sure that you could do whatever you can do to save someone's life. And that's where our folks are. They need someone to just care about who they are, what they are, and explain some very simple things to help reparent them, to encourage them to continue, and to maybe evaluate what needs to be done next. Like, what barriers can they remove? Like, how can I spend 5 minutes extra with someone to say, if you're really into, going into therapy, you might want to get your peer support specialist certification next. How can we help? Can I give you a number? Can I sign you up for something? What can we do to get that happening? And we could do that with someone that wants to go into construction. We could do that with someone that wants to go into, any field out there. But that's something that generally doesn't happen at work. And I think that they think that in general, society thinks that that's really outside of what we need to do.
That's interesting. It sounds like, and with the way you do that, like, that really empowers your employees and engages them in leadership development, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. A good example of this is we were finding that we were terminating people because they weren't showing up on time. And it was a huge amount of people comparatively. And I was pretty frustrated. We did a study, and we had looked at 60 people that we had employed, and the average tenure was 2 weeks. And
Wow.
these 60 people generally were let go, 90% of them, because they weren't on time. And of those 60, if you do just simple math, there was over 50 people that we just let go, right? So when I let them go, I didn't, if it was for not being on time, I didn't ask them anything. I just said, everybody understands that they're supposed to be on time. Like, that's just basic. I'm really sorry that this is the third or fourth time that you've been late. Let's just shake hands and, you could be on your way. There wasn't discussion. There wasn't anything. And after we had done that over 50 times, not a quick learner here, I decided to sit down and ask someone why they were late. And it's crazy. The first time I did that, and I've done it hundreds of times now, that the same thing comes out. They say that they're just not morning people. That, that they just can't do it. And you start delving into it, and it goes directly to how they woke up. But when I really looked at it, and the conversations now really go around, when are you planning to go to sleep? How are you planning to go to sleep? How are you managing your time so you get 8 hours before you go to work? How do you figure out the specifics of some sort of routine? Do you take a warm bath before? Do you meditate? Do you pray? Do you turn off all electronics when you turn out the lights? Do you know for certain that your alarm is set and that it's across the room from you so that you have to get up out of bed and you don't ever use snooze? And you know that going to bed, and you make a commitment to that? All of these things add up to something that not many other employers talk about when they fire someone for being late. But I find that our folks have a hole in the way that they've learned. And it was supposed to be learned at home and supported by schools and society along the way. But the reality of it is they really didn't understand that. And once that I've worked through this process with people, again, over 100 people easily that I've had this conversation with, and I explain all this and spend 5 minutes with them, not only do they kind of get it, not only do they change, 9 times out of 10 they change. Okay. And the crazy thing is that they kind of liked me more. And I like them more. Because we shared an experience where there was an aha moment almost every time. And they understood that I didn't have to do that. They understood that they learned something, they could use it, and it was something that was bonding as opposed to being where I completely came down on them or just fired them. Now, at the end of each of those conversations, I did say, you've got 30 days to figure out how to be on time. And if you need anything, I'll give you $10 to go to Walmart and get one of those really obnoxious red lettered, numbered alarm clocks that shake off of your bedstand, and put batteries in the bottom in case your alarm doesn't go off. We'll give it to you. At the end of the day, that's what we're all about. But you've got to be on time for the next 30 days, and if not, I am going to let you go. But I care about you, and that's why I'm talking to you.
It sounds like, with your role, I see there being a difference between being a leader versus being a manager versus being a mentor. Of course, all overlapping ideas, but it sounds like, you engage in those 3 roles, like, of course, leading a business, but also leading a movement here, managing the business in the day-to-day, but also mentoring people. Do you see those as 3 different roles?
Nope.
You don't? Okay.
No. I see that as what supervisors do every day. To me, I understand that those are segments. We were talking baseball earlier. I don't think you could take away, unless you're in the American League and have a designated hitter, you can't take away the fielding from the hitting. You know, you can't take away throwing from the fielding. You can't take away base stealing from the runner. You know, I mean, I think it's all baseball. And I think that all of that is being, you know, a supervisor, a manager, a leader in business. I think it's all the same. And that's what's hard about this.
Yeah.
You know, there's lots of people that could be great mentors, but you know, every business has to perform at a certain level with profit. You know, not everybody can do that, but it's their responsibility. Everybody that's a supervisor of people have some production.
Yeah.
There's something they have to manage. It's time, your specific objective, and it's how you get it done. You know, what's the quality of it? So, I don't know. I can't see separations. Do I understand that there are different, you know, unique perspectives on how to accomplish all those? And I do believe that everybody has strengths within those. And they also have weaknesses within those categories.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's so yeah, because to me it comes off as like three overlapping ideas, but I like, with your philosophy, it's all part of one thing.
That's what makes it hard, though.
Yeah.
Right? So I can be, like, I have, there's personalities of managers that are really caring, but you also have to be able to hit food cost and labor cost. And then at the same time, you have to manage everything so that customers are happy, you know, and technically you have to be strong. So, and it's not bad that some people are good at some things in any group and some people are not, but it's incumbent upon a leader to figure out how to make sure that the chemistry is right between everybody. So if you have someone that's really good at mentoring and caring about people, you've got to augment the team with people that are more specifically talented at trying to get the costs that you want, or making the trains run on time, for lack of a better term. So you have to be able to provide every organization with each of those things in the right helping, in the right dose.
Yeah, that's interesting. What advice do you have to people who hope to become leaders? You know, leaders in general, but also people like you who'd like to start a restaurant or a business, or start, a social enterprise, or start a movement.
Yeah, don't do it like me, let me tell you. I think that that really understanding what your values are in life and taking them to your work, so it's super clear to you. For example, I feel like I used to have, and I try not to now, I had a different voice, a different way that I was when I was at work. And I had a different way of talking when I was at church and with my church friends. And I wish that wasn't what it was. And I feel now that I'm way more authentic, because more frequently that tone, that voice, what I said, how I thought, I wish that it was always the same. And there's a little bit more peace, even though I still am incredibly flawed at this, but there is lots more congruity between the two. When I'm at church, when I'm at work, when I'm with my family, the tone, it's better. Am I great at it still? I'm still a work in progress.
I think it's important for leaders to admit and to be that work in progress throughout your leadership journey, and to be a lifelong learner, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Yeah, and I think that's part one of our interview. I appreciate those lessons in leadership development. Now I'm going to ask you about kind of the local, global context of your leadership work. But first, starting out with, what leadership lessons have you learned from books, from movies, from TV, or from pop culture?
Oh, gosh, that's a great question. I think in a weird way, it's all the things I don't want to be that I see in pop culture. But I know I am, and I always joke about this, and I believe it to be true. I've never done anything right and learned from it. I've only learned. I'm not obviously intuitively smart. I have to do something wrong and feel the pain of it in order to do something right the next time. And it's crazy. I don't know why that is, but it's the way that it is. And then in terms of books, I've learned from a bunch of books, but the one that I keep on coming back to is basically habits of an effective team. And the one thing that I'm most caught up in right now is this idea that the most effective teams are the ones that the field level employees, where they feel comfortable and have relationships with each other, where they hold each other accountable in a way that's appropriate. And there were 7 habits of effective teams in this book, and it was all about how do you nurture that? Because ultimately, you know that you're doing your job effectively when the employees are able to be supervisors for each other. And that I don't think that we'll ever have utopia in restaurants or in business, but isn't that what our goal is? Like, shouldn't you say, hey, look, I want to measure whether or not I'm doing a good job as a leader in a business by the way that my staff performs when no one's looking.
Yes, that's interesting. What are who would you say are your most important leadership role models? And I'm interested to know in both real people, but also any fictional leaders.
Oh gosh, my wife is by far my best example of how to lead. We have spirited discussions even this morning about how we're leading and what we're doing. But the reality of it is that that complete opposite idea from her about what I'm good at is completely different than what she's really good at, right? And so it's the ability to communicate effectively in order to take both perspectives, and I love that. And then a guy named Jim Stanley and a guy named Art Levitt, they taught me massive amounts. And then in terms of kind of overall leadership that everybody would know, it's a little bit of everybody all the time. But I am, I'm enthralled with a lot of people like Franklin Delano Roosevelt. I just read some of his quotes about how having to come out of the Depression, and his thought process, I believe, in a lot of different ways, even though my personal political ideology is the other side. But I appreciate kind of his thoughtfulness and the way that he went about some certain things and the strength in which he did it. So I think that's a good model for me. And I think that Christ is probably, for me, the ultimate measurement of what it is. And that's what inspires me.
Do you see, I think I see you definitely as a leader in a movement for second chance employment and social impact here locally. Do you see yourself as part of that movement globally as well in second chance employment and social impact?
I think I have a lot of experience in it, and I've experimented enough to try to figure out what's good for not only our employees first, but what's good for the free enterprise system. And I think what we've developed because we had to, not because we were smart, but because we kept on trying things, we've developed a model where all employers could take on what we do and learn from the mistakes that we've had, practice relational employment, practice this idea of using a job to help people.
Yeah.
And I think that anybody could apply this to their business. And we're working really hard to develop systems and measurements to be able to share our data with people so that they can understand what works and why. But it's going to take someone that has their values in the right spot, that doesn't let the past dictate what they do. And you're going to have to come together with a little courage, but it can be done easily. And I tell people that if you're about people and not so much about rules, that our system is easy.
More about people, less about rules. I like that. How do you reflect on what's kind of happening around the world as a restaurant owner and founder, and also as part of the being a part of the second chance employment? Like, how does what's happening around the globe impact the leadership decisions you make?
Well, I mean, clearly, if we don't figure out how to get more people into the workforce, it's going to affect our economy. One of the biggest things that I think that we're missing here is that there's 12% of the workforce that is an active addiction, available workforce. We have 4% unemployment. And if we could just help literally a third of those people, we could have all of our jobs completely covered. So what are we going to do to get that? And I think that for us, we have the same issues when we employ someone without the extra leadership that we impose at DV8 with people that have a past. But we found that our results are incredibly good, and they beat national standards for restaurants that don't employ people with a past. But for us as a country, for us as a global economy, we ought to be able to put people to work and not just say, well, because you have gaps in your employment, you can't have a job. And just because you made a mistake in your past, you can't be employed. Someone else can do it. And I give a job, this is an employer talk, I give a job that's higher than minimum wage, so you can go get a minimum wage job. And it perpetuates this idea that literally, once you've made a mistake, you aren't worthy of being employed. And we need every person to be fully productive. And I have met so many people, and they're smart, and they're gifted, and they're motivated if you learn how to motivate them. And I think that a lot of employers don't recognize that the 3 reasons why people end up in addiction and incarcerated is if you have the heredity for addiction, your parents, your grandparents, your lineage. Second, if you've had an adverse childhood experience like trauma, neglect, abuse. And then third, your zip code. And I'm a person that has the addiction in their family. I had adverse childhood experiences, abuse when I was growing up. And lastly, I was fortunate. I didn't have a terrible zip code. I had a pretty good zip code. But I see every day people that don't have that ability to live, to be born in the right spot. We don't choose any of those 3 things, And the reality for me is if someone ends up in addiction and it's for 3 reasons that they have nothing to do with, and we keep on preventing jobs from them, not only is it bad for our economy, it's bad for our souls.
I like that. Yeah, that connection you make to the impact it has on the nation and the state, but also to us as society.
I mean, how do you feel when someone is asking for a handout or homeless? Or what would happen if someone just got out of prison and they asked you for a job, and that might have been just what they needed, right? But 3 out of 4 people just coming out of prison don't have a job in 18 months. That's a problem.
It really is. How do you see your work with DV8 Kitchen, with the foundation, and also, just in social enterprise in general? How do you see that putting Kentucky on the global map? How does that show what Kentucky has to offer?
People have been really interested in what we're doing and how we're doing it, and it's been pretty humbling. But this is all the people that are working it that create this environment that New York Times wanted to know about, or NBC Nightly News, or Oprah Magazine over the years. But honestly, I don't know why more people aren't really embracing this idea. You can have the idea of what is your yes to employing people in a second chance position, and any business can figure it out. And if it's not holding someone to accountable to recovery like we do as a validator to keeping employment, it could be whatever you choose, as long as it's fair and as long as you're giving an opportunity that most wouldn't. Yeah. And so I don't know how much we're making an impact. I know that we have some small, humble impact, and I'm hoping to do more. But I'm proud of that. But I don't think that that's anything to take a badge of honor for.
I appreciate that that very, very humble response from you. It's great to get recognized by nationally and around the world, but also, like you said, you got to think about where it is too. What do you see as, what's next for your leadership journey, whether in DV8 or other work you're doing?
We, 2 things happened a year ago. We realized that our staff, once they left us, were not necessarily heading to the right career choices. They still had plenty of barriers that prevented them from human flourishing. And they didn't have an incredibly great grasp, crazy enough, after working with us for a year and in a residential living facility for recovery for a year. They didn't have an incredible grasp of how practically to apply recovery to their life. So we went to them with these issues. We went to our staff a year ago with these issues and said, would you appreciate the ability to go through a program that we would motivate you to be in to try to get better at these 3 things? And they said yes. And they helped us craft curriculum that we're about ready to roll out January 1, where every employee that we hire is going to have the ability to go through a 30 to 45 day opportunity to earn their way into this program. Very low bar, just care. And after that, they could sign up for a 12-month program that we would put them through, working with our social worker to try to remove barriers, to try to figure out how to make recovery more portable for them so they could carry it with them everywhere, to establish what their dream job would be, and have a path for 15 years, if that's what it takes, to get to the corner office in a construction company or recovery recovery community. Whatever they chose, we want them to aspire high. And we would work with them for 12 months, and if they completed the program, which we expect everybody to, then we would end up paying them $1,000 bonus and, helping them throughout their employment journey for the next 15 years. And that's what we hope to do. We hope to build a community of DV8 employees that thrive for the rest of their life, not just when they're employed with us. We're going to measure and we're going to document all the information in a way that we hadn't in the past. So we're going to be able to share all this information with other employers as we grow, and hopefully they'll figure out how to say yes to someone with a background of addiction or incarceration in the future. So that really removing this idea that we can't hire someone with a past, that we can. There's a yes for every employer.
Yeah. I think that's a great goal, and I think it sounds like you guys are already taking huge steps toward that, and I look forward to hearing about how other parts of the economy and other businesses are doing the same. But yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate the work you're leading, the great things you all do at DV8 Kitchen, helping marginalized communities, as well as the great food. And I appreciate you being so vulnerable and talking about us and your leadership journey, and about you being a work in progress. I really appreciate you sharing all this with us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Of course. Thank you, Rob. It was great. That concludes my interview with Rob Perez. To learn more about his work at DV8 Kitchen, check out dv8kitchen.com. That is the letter D, the letter V, the number 8, and then kitchen.com. I also suggest reading their Soulful Enterprise page on that website to learn more about their immersive leadership training toward second chance employment. DV8 Kitchen has 2 locations in Lexington, on South Broadway and on East 3rd Street in the East End. They have great food, great staff, and they contribute to a lot of great causes. Tune in for my next episode with Sharon Murphy, the founder of Real Life Civics and a legislative aide to the Lexington City Council. That episode will come out during the first week of November. Remember to live local and think global, fellow changemakers. Bye.